Welcome to Insights for Manufacturing, the podcast that supports the UK manufacturing sector. Hosted by Jeff Beecham, the manufacturer's recruiter. Hello and welcome to Insights for Manufacturing. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Alastair Crawford, who is Managing Director of LMAC or LMAC, a leading business growth and productivity improvement consultancy. Welcome to the show, Alastair. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me along.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Been looking forward to this conversation. I think in manufacturing and engineering, improvements, CI, lean, any sort of business improvements to get more efficient, more profitable is always a good thing. And it's been my experience of talking to many businesses and candidates over the years that some organisations get that right, and others, it's a real challenge knowing how to go about any sort of transformation program. But we'll talk about some of the pitfalls, I'm sure, as we go along, and some of the opportunities that you're seeing in the sector at the moment. So to start off with, business growth and sort of lean strategies, always planned with the best intentions, but where do so many of them go wrong, Alastair?
That's an interesting question, because you're right. You see lots of examples where companies are really flying and you can see the adoption is going really well. And then unfortunately, you do come across a lot of companies where it hasn't quite gone to plan. I think there's a few, in my experience, there's a few reasons why this happens. I think the first one is there's misalignment in terms of why are we doing this. So it almost becomes a standalone project. So if you think about any company out there at the moment, certainly within manufacturing, they're so busy. They've got so many projects and challenges with energy costs, with people, and all of these projects up in the air. If you then bring along a continuous improvement program or a lean program or whatever you want to call it, then unless that's aligned to why are we doing this and what's the objective, it just becomes a standalone project. And when things get busy, it's one of the first projects that gets dropped. So I think that's my first bit of feedback is companies don't explain why they're doing it properly, and they don't have it as we're using this as a tool to leverage what we're looking to achieve. So that's the first challenge that I see. The second one is probably around, I touched on it briefly, but there's too many priorities. So a company has got limited time and effort, and you've only got so much discretionary effort across the business. So where do we channel that? So we need to make sure that if we're going to go ahead and embark on this change program, then we're resourcing it properly, and we're making sure that we're not trying to do too much. So they're two of the fundamental things that I think from a strategic level stop them. We're not enabling them, or we're not setting them up to be successful in the first place. And then I think the third one, which you'll hear very commonly, is that we're really not engaging with the people who are going to be part of that change. So we're not explaining to them. Humans are simple creatures, really, is that there's always the what's in it for me factor. And if we're embarking on a change, then the first question you'll get asked is, well, why are we doing this? What does it mean to me? And if we can't form a strong link and get that message across consistently, and I don't just mean a one-off briefing to the company where we say, this is what we're doing, people need to be reinforced. So communication, why are we doing this? How is this going to support our business? How does it align with what we're trying to achieve as a business and our future growth? How is this going to benefit me as an individual? And how do we keep reinforcing that message? And communication, I think, is one of the critical things of a successful change program. Just over communicate, just tell people what's going on, keep telling them, keep listening to them, keep involving them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's interesting how important that, the communication is. It's a team effort, isn't it? Ideally, any sort of change or transformation program, I guess, should be driven either from the top down, or certainly, unless the board are bought into it, and everybody's singing the same hymn, it's difficult to get that consistency, I suppose, throughout the whole workforce and team.
And they have to model the right behaviours as well. So if you think around one of the principles that you may want to be trying to promote by embarking on a lean program is we want a culture of continuous improvement, or we want a problem-solving culture. Well, actually, if the leaders are not modelling that behaviour and they're not creating this culture where problems are good and they're using the same tools, it's very easy for senior leaders to say, this is the program we're doing, but really what they mean is this is what we want you to do, and it doesn't affect us. So I think that not just supporting it, but supporting it by modeling the right behaviors, and is what's really going to help.
Absolutely. And, we're going to talk about culture. I mean, whether it's plant, process, people that need improving, whatever the reason is behind the improvement project, it really is key for the business to lay a solid foundation really through the right culture. And, because everything else really is built on that platform. I've seen a lot of companies go through transformation programs, and when you've got a workforce that are highly motivated, you've got low attrition, you've got fairly good productivity, but you obviously need to improve. Transformation programs can be quite successful, but when you've got these almost inherent issues, people issues, culture issues, there's this sort of them and us mentality. If things aren't communicated properly, and as you said before, the reasons why you're embarking on whatever change it is you're going through, I think that does create the sort of nervousness, that apprehension. It's the fear of the unknown, isn't it? When a workforce or a team are being told, look, this is what we're going to do, but the reasons and the sort of benefits that it will bring not only to the business but for those individuals or teams, I can see where quite quickly the wheels could come off the wagon.
Easily done, and because people don't like change.
Yeah,
generally. So we have to manage that very carefully to make sure that people you make it as easy transition as possible.
Yeah. In your sort of dealings, Alastair, with businesses across manufacturing, what are you seeing generally in terms of the state of company culture? I mean, clearly you will have a mandate to go into a business and help them transform and improve, and through that relationship, you get to know the main stakeholders. You'll spend some time within the business. What do you sort of pick up in terms of the culture? And, are there as many issues as a lot of people say? I mean, I'm a firm believer in it. Most businesses have some sort of culture issue, whether it's a major one or whether there's room for improvement. But what are you seeing?
Oh, it's a difficult one to answer because I think it's a real mixed bag. First of all, it is a cliche, but culture is everything within a business. Fundamentally, that's what will make a company successful or not. And I often use sporting analogies to bring it to life. And if you look at any sporting team, you can have the best people on that sporting team. They can have the best training equipment in the background to make them as fit as possible. But we've got loads of examples whereby you get the real underdogs that haven't got the individual personalities and experts, but actually they're performing really well as a team. And it all comes down to that culture. So it is a cliche, but culture is everything. And it's the same for businesses. They can have the best systems, the best software, the best technology, the best tools, the best products. But unless you've got the people that are actually making that product and the sales team and all across the business, unless they're aligned and pulling in the same direction, then you're never going to be world class. So that's my first comment. The reason I said it's a mixed bag is because culture is led from the top. So that culture will have been built up from years worth of experiences that organization has had. So depending on what that leadership team has been like over the last X years, that has created the current culture. So I'll walk into some businesses and there's some really shining lights and some good examples whereby you've got a leader that demonstrates believes the right values. They're passionate about what they do. They've got a really good vision that they're good at communicating through the business. They genuinely care about their people. They're listening to them. Really good example. So when I go and support those businesses on how to improve productivity, you can imagine how quickly you can get some change, because this is just, you've got their support, you can position it properly, you can get some real good momentum. And then you've got the opposite end of the spectrum whereby you've got some business owners that think differently, and they're really in it to, or in the past they've been in it to generate profit. And that's the way they manage. Their management style can be a bit dictatorial. And therefore they're bringing us in to try and change the culture of the business, when really the challenge is around some of their behaviors and how they've led the business over the last X number of years. And that's I guess why we're in business, because there's no one size fits all in terms of a solution. What we have to do is understand where is the business and what's the root cause of that culture being the way it is. And you can design a culture. You can't quickly change a culture, you can shape a culture. So what we do is we really understand, where are you as a business? Where are you trying to get to? What's the culture that you're trying to create to enable you for future success? And then how do we create the right beliefs within the organization and give people the right experiences that show that this is the culture we're trying to demonstrate? So if I use the problem solving example that we talked about before, then if we want to create a problem solving culture whereby people are open and honest and they work together to solve problems and they don't sweep them under the carpet, that needs to be role modeled, and we need to give people experiences where the first time they raise a problem, we thank them and we support them. And by doing that, and if we do that not just once, but if we do that continually over a number of days, weeks and months, we will shape the culture to say, actually, this is a company where I can raise a problem. All of it can be improved, and probably all of it does need some focus to help improve if we really want to improve manufacturing across the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at some of the typical challenges that your clients would come up with, and I guess they would be, indicative of a lot of manufacturing businesses. The three main challenges are usually people, cost, and on-time delivery. What are the trends in terms of the root cause of these things? I mean, there's a myriad of different reasons why, issues with people, cost, or OTD arise, but I suppose there are some causes that are more common than others. So what sort of trends do you see across those three sort of areas in terms of the root cause?
Yeah. I'm going to explain it quite simply, I hope, in that somebody else may have a different perspective, but from my point of view, the root cause of all of these issues is a lack of productivity improvements over the years. And if you think around the challenges, if I just break those three challenges down, we've got the resource issue. We've had the luxury of having cheaper Eastern European labour in the UK for a number of years, thereby there hasn't been a sense of urgency to look at how we automate and how we improve and make things more efficient. Yep. So because we haven't focused on that productivity improvement, then suddenly that has been taken away and we're left with this massive skills shortage. Cost, the same thing. If you think around now, people haven't got enough resources, their overheads have remained the same, so you're still having to pay off that equipment, you've still got the same size factory, your lights, your energy, you're actually using more of it because you're not as efficient, you've lost some of these people, so you're actually having to run it longer, so your overheads may have actually gone up. And then from the on-time delivery, it's the same challenge because we've lost some of the resources, we can't deliver on time. So for me, all of those challenges are a result of the fact we haven't invested properly in terms of productivity improvements over the last number of years. And the UK's got some way to go in terms of the adoption of technology and automation and things that can really help the business to improve. Yeah. So my firm belief is if we can improve productivity, you're going to require less people, so you can do the same volume with less people, or really what most businesses are looking to do is more with the same resources. We can develop higher value, better paying jobs because people are going to be doing different things. Yeah. Your cost base is going to be lower because you're going to get better return on the assets you're using because you're not running them as long, and you can deliver on time. So I think focus on productivity.
Yeah. That's a great answer. I like the way you've explained that. And I suppose, over the last sort of 12 to 18 months during the pandemic, and then we've had these awful, this supply chain disruption for a number of reasons. We've got the war in Ukraine, we've got the microchip shortage, we've got all these
perfect storm, isn't it?
Blasted container shortages, and it is a perfect storm. And I think one of the things that's become clear is that a lot of businesses seem to be almost prioritizing it's all about labor shortage. We haven't got the skills, we haven't got the people. The Eastern European workers have gone back. Okay, well, we know all of that. We know businesses and the further education organizations need to work a little bit smarter in terms of having the right sort of support for manufacturers for their needs. But having said that, if businesses invested more money in automation and robotics, and I've been a fan of this for a number of years, it's not about, yes, they probably will need to invest in skills because there will be people that maybe will be coming up to retirement age, and they've got to keep that pipeline full. So I do recognize the fact that, yes, we do need a focus on skills, but automation can fill a huge amount of the gaps. Obviously, the supply chain, low-cost countries and all the stuff coming in from the Far East, for example, businesses are waiting for deliveries that used to take, 6 to 12 weeks. Sometimes now I'm hearing that it might be 6, 8, 10, 12 months before they can get stuff in. By keeping the same amount of people where they can and investing in more capital equipment, in robotics, automation, and cobots are probably a great way to go for certain applications. Businesses can still grow, even though we've got this labour shortage. And in some areas, it's not straightforward. You can't just have an automated solution for everything. I'm a strong advocate for businesses stepping up and just investing that money. Whilst there's a bit of I suppose there's a trade-off, isn't there, of keeping enough cash in the business in these uncertain times.
Yeah.
But it will get to a point where if they're not investing, we're already behind on productivity compared to a lot of advanced industrial countries. So at some point, that scale has got a tip, hasn't it? I mean,
definitely. I think we're there. We're getting very close. The fact that we've not got enough people, the money we're having to pay people, the pay rises we're having to give, everyone's competing, so the salaries are just going through the roof.
Yeah.
So I think that tipping point and that trade-off point is getting very close. And I think the other thing to recognise is that it's not just all about, when we talk around automation or Industry 4 and digital technology, it's not just all about putting robots on the shop floor, because that's been around for a number of years, and that's really the third industrial revolution when we came through and automated some of that. There's an example whereby companies can improve productivity, not through looking at automation on the shop floor, but just investing in better planning software.
Yeah.
So the way that people plan and schedule, I'm working with a couple of businesses at the moment where this is the number one priority. It's not that they need to automate, actually, it's that they're not creating a realistic plan for the week. They're not creating an optimal plan. And because of that, they're losing 20, 30% of capacity because they're not doing the right things and people are doing the wrong jobs and they're in the wrong areas. So I think we need to just really broaden people's minds around, it's not just about automation, it's around how do we use some of this digital manufacturing technology anywhere through the process. It could be around the person setting up the job, person who's taking the order in, and you're relying on one person who can set the job up in the system. That can be automated.
Yeah.
So that's a bot sitting on your computer using robotic process automation. The manufacturing part of the process is generally a couple of hours in the middle. There's about a 4-week lead time. So everyone focuses on the actual manufacturing process, but there's opportunities to improve the end-to-end value chain where you can have some real good benefits. So that's part of what we're trying to do with our Siri offering that we'll perhaps talk about later on. But it's just to educate people that there's so many new technologies out there that can help your business to improve and become more competitive. And it's around a business understanding what's my bottleneck, where's my challenge, and then picking the appropriate tool to solve that challenge.
Yeah. So Industry 4 then, smart manufacturing, you mentioned digitalisation. What would be the main sort of barriers for manufacturing businesses and in particular SMEs to embracing these technical transformations with more digital processes?
Yeah. I'd say the first one is they don't know where to start. So if you put yourself in the shoes of an MD of an SME, they're so busy. They're wearing so many hats. They've got all of these challenges at the moment. Do they really have the time to go and research and understand what all of these technology and solutions are out there? Because unless they're presented to you, then common sense. It's common sense after you know it, but when you don't know that information, it's hard, and they haven't got time to spend hours on the internet Googling and going to trade shows and seeing things. So I think the first challenge is that they don't know what's out there and they don't know where to start. They'll have heard of the obvious things. They'll have heard of cobots and robots, and they'll have potentially vendors selling them their solutions, and that could be a good solution for them, but it might not be. And some companies have been burnt in the past with investing in a robot or investing in something that wasn't the right area to focus on, and therefore they didn't get the return on investment, so they're a bit hesitant to actually invest anymore. So there's a couple of challenges in there. So I think what we're trying to do with SMEs is to really give them, they need support in terms of where do I start. And that's what we're trying to do as a consultancy, and that's what we are doing is supporting SMEs to say, look, for you as an SME, your priority is you need to reduce your lead time, you need to improve your quality, whatever it is. And therefore, if this is what you need to do, these are the areas where you should focus on. So the easiest example is a company needs to improve their on-time delivery because there's a lot of variation. Well, focusing on your advanced planning system and looking at some software and how you can be a bit smarter, because things are changing so quickly in the current manufacturing landscape, with variation in supplies coming in, absenteeism on the shop floor, adjusting what you can do. All of this, it's very dynamic. It's changing minute by minute. So you need a good system that can actually real time monitor that and make adjustments as we go. And that's, there's some software out there that can help with that. So that's just one example of, I forgot where I was going with that, but the original question was around what are the challenges with businesses, and it's around not knowing where to focus. And they're only aware of the things that they've heard of, i.e. robots and cobots. So we need to be better at educating people on, actually, this is what you need. So that's
okay. No, that's a good explanation. So you mentioned Siri. Now, this is something that I'm not, to be honest, I'm not overly familiar with. It's Smart Industry Readiness, the Smart Industry Readiness Index.
Well done.
So what is that? What's it for? How can manufacturers benefit from having a Siri application?
So it's an internationally recognized best practice tool to help a company assess where they are currently and to help them prioritize which area of Industry 4 or which bit of digital manufacturing technology is going to give them the biggest return on investment. So it's really to counter the challenge that I said earlier on around people don't know where to start and they don't know what to do. That was why Siri was invented. The background, quick summary of the background, it was developed in Singapore back in 2017. They got a group of some big consultancy firms, some automation and industry experts, as a broad range of people together to develop this. Singapore have got a vision to grow manufacturing GDP to 30%. That's the journey they're on. So significant. They can see that for the future of Singapore, it's in manufacturing. They can't have lots of people. They need to invest in advanced manufacturing. And they wanted a method where they could take all of their manufacturing companies on a journey and scale it very quickly. So they developed this framework and this tool that fundamentally does an assessment of your business, where you are now. So over a couple of days, a certified Siri assessor, which we're one of those, comes into your business, evaluates where you are, what your business objectives are, understands your costs, understands your priority KPIs. We take all of that information in. There's an algorithm that sits in the background. We plug all of that data in, and what it does is it spits out the priority areas for your business. So if your challenge is ABC and your main costs are X, Y, Z, and you need to improve lead time and whatever else, it will take all of this into account and it will say you need to focus on these 4 dimensions. So it really cuts through all of that headache of saying, I don't know where to start. Because for us, any technology, any digital manufacturing technology and program you're implementing, there has to be a clear return on investment, and it has to be in line with, going back to what I said before around there's so many priorities, we need to have an aligned vision that we are trying to improve this cost factor and we're trying to drive this KPI up. Therefore, this is the right technology that you're going to use. So it takes a couple of days to go through the business. As part of that, we educate your leadership team, because that's one of the other challenges I say is that your leaders don't really understand what Industry 4 is. And maybe your operations and your manufacturing team are, but you may have a sales director that thinks this doesn't apply to me, and your HR person or your people GM will be sitting there saying, I don't get it and it's not for us. So what we're trying to do with Siri is make sure that everyone's educated that digital manufacturing and Industry 4 principles can have an impact on every part of that function of your value chain. And if everyone's on the same page, then you don't have all of these pet projects. Everyone's aligned towards one common goal.
Great. It just boils back to communication again, doesn't it? It's just so important, runs through everything. Yeah, and people just being aligned, I think, is a critical bit. You can imagine a company with
with 8 different leaders, if they've all got 8 different ideas of what the business needs to do to be successful, then you've got 8 people pulling in different directions. And not aligned towards that one common vision. So it's a bit of a combination of aligning everybody, educating them, using the algorithm to prioritize, and then out of that you get a roadmap to say these are the areas we're going to focus on, and then they can go and invest with confidence that they're investing in the right areas that's going to give them return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I know you've got operations here in the UK and also in New Zealand, where the business was originally sort of founded. So in terms of Siri, then, what are the main trends that you're seeing through performing these Siri assessments in the UK and New Zealand? And are there any sort of differences in the results across the 2 countries? I mean, sometimes with systems or products or businesses, you have a model that works, but then if you just pick that up and plant it somewhere else, it doesn't necessarily give you the same sort of output. So what are you seeing, when you compare the 2 countries?
It's a good question. I get asked it a lot because, as you mentioned, we were founded in New Zealand, and that's where the majority of our team have been for a number of years. And me coming back to the UK 7 months ago, you get asked those questions around, well, is it that applicable to us? Because New Zealand's very different. It's very similar. Certainly it's an SME. When you look at the business landscape, New Zealand doesn't have the big multinationals, so it doesn't have the big aerospace and automotive sectors that the UK has got. So I think in the UK, you've got some really mature organisations that are doing some really exciting and cutting edge stuff around here, and you've got lots of these lighthouse factories in the UK that are doing some really amazing things, which you don't have that in New Zealand. But when you boil it down to an SME, some of the SMEs, I'm seeing no difference. I think the level of maturity where they're at on the journey is almost identical, which is interesting. Now, what are we seeing from doing the assessment? So our assessment splits Industry 4 into 16 different dimensions. I'm not going to go through the detail, but it splits it down into 16 dimensions of Industry 4. And from doing the assessments across New Zealand and in the UK, we're seeing the same trends in terms of where the priorities are. And the first one is around vertical integration, and that's what that really means is how you capture information from your operators or machines on the shop floor, how they go back through your systems and technology, so it can go back into your planning system, it can go back into your sales CRM. Yeah, because that information, the speed of that information going back into the right systems is critical these days. As I mentioned before, there's so many things changing in a business. Raw material supply shortage and a change in delivery times, a machine being broken down and therefore it can't perform and it's running behind. All of these things that are happening, all these variables that are happening across a business. If you think around the old process, by the time that gets communicated from somebody to somebody else in the next daily meeting, you've suddenly lost track and you've never really got one view of what's happening at any one time, because you're always playing catch up. So vertical integration is how you capture real-time data and feed it back to the right people or the right processes or the right systems so that they can make real-time decisions, all with the aim of making the right decision so that we can make today the best day it can be, rather than waiting. Because once it's gone, you've lost that day. Nothing you can do. You can have a meeting the next day and talk about what went wrong. But what we're trying to do is get real-time information and real-time problem solving. So vertical integration is critical. And then to enable that, what we're seeing is it's called shop floor connectivity, the connectivity of your machines on the shop floor so that they can talk to other machines and other systems interoperably, meaning that they can communicate using the same language and they're not talking 2 different languages. So the ability for your machines and your processes to be able to communicate, I think. So in summary, it's all around data analytics, real-time information. That's the number one trend we're seeing across businesses. Second one being automation, as you mentioned, because with a product from a productivity point of view and lack of people and resources, then companies needing to automate. Usually manufacturing companies, their biggest costs are labor, raw materials. So if you think around that, how can we have the biggest impact on some of those? And it's through automation.
Yeah. And how have you seen the sort of IoT devices? Looking at the UK and New Zealand. I know the sort of interconnectivity and it's all about big data, isn't it? All the pieces of machinery and systems being able to talk and communicate to one another. There's thousands of these different devices available, and a lot of businesses have invested heavily in IoT. I think one of the things that sort of come to the fore over the last few months, and I had a guest on the podcast a few episodes ago, Chris Windley, talking about cybersecurity. The sort of risks involved, when you're sort of multiplying up the potential for breaches into your system, and apparently manufacturing is now the number one target for cybersecurity. What are you seeing any trends in terms of the sort of type of IoT, or the difference in the sort of investment value for different systems across the two countries, or is that just the same wherever you are?
No difference across the two countries. I think New Zealand's probably a bit more laid back and complacent about cybersecurity,
really,
which is a risk. Generally, I think New Zealand's a bit more laid back in general, so their attitude toward things is a bit more laid back, which isn't always helpful in these scenarios. But I'm not seeing a big difference. I think what we are seeing is, you're exactly right, as companies look to deploy more IoT solutions to gather data, then there's going to be more increased risk. So when we're doing the Siri assessment, part of the maturity, because we assess it on a banding from 0 to 5, and to move from a band 2 to a band 3, we have to consider making things secure and cyber security. So when we're building a roadmap with a business, it's not just a case of we need to deploy this technology. As part of our education piece, we're educating the team that these are the risks that come alongside that. We're not experts in terms of there's so many devices out there, but we do partner with people to bring in the right people to make sure that as a company is embarking on a digital manufacturing journey, they do need to be comfortable that things are safe and secure. Another thing while we're talking around data, because I think one thing I've noticed is there's this big push on data and analytics and big data. And I think we have to be we just have to be pragmatic about this, because yes, we could connect every single machine and we could get data from every single machine. But I think we have to go back to the principle of why are we collecting that data, and why is it going to be useful for us? And if we think about it from the top down, what makes us successful as a business? Is it quality? Is it lead time? And if we understand what makes us successful, then we can measure. How do we measure that? So delivery on time, well, it's our default measure. Okay, what information do we need to be able to measure real-time default? We need A, B, and C. Therefore, what connectivity do we need, and what sensors do we need? Because otherwise, we could go and put sensors on everything, and it'd be great. We'd have all these lovely visual dashboards, but actually, it's cost us a lot of money, and it's not overkill. And it's overkill. So I think companies have to be very focused on, why are we doing this? Is it really important for us to know exactly how that machine is performing, or condition monitoring, etc.? And that's our approach. Is very much a pragmatic approach, working from what are we trying to achieve, who needs what insights, where are we going to get the data from, and then let's start in one area, get that sorted, and move on to the next one. Otherwise, it's quite a daunting task to think that you have to go through the whole operation and capture every bit of data.
I wouldn't want to be the person responsible for everything. As you say, a lot of it would be just wasted. You're just collecting data, some of the data for the sake of it, when you should be focusing on the critical data or the priority.
And it just adds more noise. It can be more harmful, because as soon as you've got a KPI, or as soon as you see that deteriorating, automatically people start wanting to do something about it. So I think having the right number of KPIs and the right amount of data is what we need.
You mentioned condition monitoring. I was going to ask you about sort of asset management. In my job as a recruiter, I've heard a number of times from roles that I've recruited in the past, whether it's sort of engineering related or manufacturing management, plant management related, you have this phrase of, you've got to sweat your assets to get your maximum return on investment. The FD or the CFO is going to be it's going to be on the case of manufacturing and engineering to get every last drop out of their assets, and I get that. But sometimes the cost of a poor maintenance strategy or executing that maintenance strategy can end up costing a lot more than simply shutting a machine down for a few hours lost production to undertake the critical maintenance. So there's always that sort of trade-off, I think, between production. So you've got your engineers or your maintenance team, crying out, you need to let us have this line for an hour or a couple of hours. We need to do X, Y, Z. Well, no, we can't stop the line because of, we've got these orders that we need to get out the door. So there's a constant battle. But, these days we've got predictive maintenance, we've got condition monitoring, planned preventative maintenance. All of these things are vital in prolonging plant lifetime, which adds value to the initial investment, but there are still so many businesses prioritizing purely output and invoice value over keeping their plant alive, maintaining their plant in the way that it should be. So how difficult is it to strike the right balance? With these sort of digital systems, is there a solution to that age-old problem of, you just got to keep the machines running flat out and we'll deal with a breakdown if we need to? So how do you get that sort of balance right, and what can the sort of software and technology do to overcome that?
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's a difficult one, because some of it will come back to what we were talking about before, is the culture of the organization. You've got some very mature organizations that recognize, and the leaders are switched on, that they recognize, and maybe it's because they've been bitten in the past by lack of maintenance. So you'll have some organizations that even if you need to get things out the door and you're behind, they will still allow the maintenance schedules to happen because they know it's the right thing to do. Yeah. And they want to create the right beliefs and experiences, and that's the culture we've got. And then you've got the opposite. In terms of how technology can help, then you've mentioned a few of them. You've got lots of technology that we can put on equipment, and none of this is new, by the way. Condition monitoring. We've been monitoring bearings and monitoring heat and things like that for a number of years. Back when I was an apprentice, many years ago, I think I was taught on putting something against a bearing and being able to listen to when it was wearing out. Yeah. So the technology that we've got can definitely help to paint that picture, because I think if you were an operations director and you had a maintenance manager come to you and say, here's the data and we can see the trend that this bearing is about to fail, and if you don't give it to me next week, it's going to fail and cause you 8 hours of downtime, I think it would be a pretty foolish operations person to say, no, you can't have it. Yeah. So the data's king, isn't it? If you can show and paint that picture that this is the right thing to do, it becomes an educated decision. So it can definitely help to cut through. If you think back to the old days, what it would have been is, I need this equipment because I've not had it for a while, and it becomes a very subjective conversation. So it can definitely help. My view on this is that we need to be pragmatic. You'll hear that word coming through a lot about the way LMAC work, is we're very, very much a pragmatic company. Yeah. Now, if you think about any assets you've got in a business, and let me give you a couple of examples. You got a CNC machine shop, and that CNC machine shop might have one unit where there's 7 identical machines. And at the moment, that's not their constraint. They've only got 3 people that can run it. So in that scenario, if one of those machines goes down, it's not mission critical because it's not your constraint. However, you might have a laser machine over here. It's your only laser machine, and that feeds the rest of your business. So for me, it's around understanding the criticality of your equipment. And a business needs to know, out of all of these assets I've got, which are mission critical. If that one goes down, I can't back it up. The spares are going to come from overseas, so it's going to be down for a few weeks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we can do that assessment, then we can have a logical, pragmatic asset management strategy. And that's where you invest the time. So if that's a mission critical, think about aeroplanes. Everything's monitored. Why? Because if it goes wrong, it's critical. It's life critical. We need to have the same approach within manufacturing organizations, that we understand this pump here is critical. If that goes down, a compressor is a good example. Most companies, if that compressor goes down, the whole place goes down. So on the compressor, you'd like to have good condition monitoring, the right maintenance regimes, etc. Whereas equipment X over here, we may allow that to run to failure because actually the cost is not that great. So horses for courses. I think digital technology can help us to paint a better picture, but it does come down to understanding your assets and knowing which are critical and spending the money where it's going to give you the best return.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So, Alastair, LMAC, you've been operating in the UK for 10 years now and 17 in New Zealand.
Yeah.
When the business was started in New Zealand, you've said on your website, its aim was to reverse the trend of offshoring manufacturing. So given the current trend here in the UK for more reshoring over the last few years, and we've got to applaud businesses and their sentiment and their reasons for doing that. It's long overdue. How is this affecting the opportunities and the need for UK manufacturing to go full throttle, with things like Industry 4, lean, continuous improvements? It just seems like a great opportunity.
It is. I think we're ideal. All of these things coming together with disruption in supply chain, etc., is leading us towards we want to secure supply chain and bringing things closer. So you can see the trend, it's reversed from offshoring things that were cheaper, and now we're looking at how can we have a more secure supply chain. I think we've got a great opportunity, and I'll go back to companies need to, if they want to compete and we want to bring that, there's always going to be a cost factor in there. So having the supply local is one of the factors, but if you're going to be charging twice as much, you're still going to be procuring from overseas. So we have to focus on how can we reduce the cost and how can we become more competitive. And to do that, I'm going to go back to productivity. We haven't invested. We need to get more productive. If we want to compete, we need to look at, we're never going to compete on labor. We need to look at how can we get smarter in what we're doing. And that really comes down to some of the digital manufacturing technologies, some of the automation, the software that's out there too, technology all across the value chain that can really make a difference. So I think it's fundamental to, if we want to bring things, reshore things and be competitive, we have to focus on some of these areas, and now's the time to do it. And there's things that are helping in terms of being able to be a low volume manufacturer, because the UK, it can become, historically has been quite expensive to do low volume, high variety of products. But again, there's technology out there that we're getting shorter changeover times and we're getting more flexible manufacturing. We've got examples whereby in the past you had to program a robot to do a task, and therefore it would only pay back if you were making 1,000 of those widgets. These days we can send data to that robot, we can send the basic program, and it can learn and teach itself, and it can go and weld things from a program. So you're starting to get some of this emerging technology that can really support low volume, high variety manufacturing. So I think all these things coming together, costs going up overseas, people wanting to secure local supply chains, emerging technology, we're at the perfect time for the fourth industrial revolution, which is really where we're sitting to try and help advise companies on how do we do it, where do we start.
Brilliant. So on that then, what's the latest news coming out of LMAC? I mean, what are you involved with currently? What are the plans for Q4 and next year, really?
That's a good question. So in New Zealand, we've been doing the Siri assessments. We've been working closely. We were lucky enough to win an RFP in New Zealand, so we've been working closely, delivering a government program which is supporting manufacturers. That's really taken off in the last couple of years. So it's really exciting times in New Zealand that we're going to be expanding that program. And the intention of that is we're getting to a really good point where we've got a large network of manufacturing companies now in New Zealand that are starting to share and work together to improve. So really exciting time in New Zealand. For the UK, then they're quite early on in that journey. I came back to the UK 7 months ago and really promoting our Siri offering and keen to support manufacturers. So for the UK business, it's very much following the success we've had in New Zealand with helping the manufacturing community to improve over there.
Yeah.
We've brought that offering back to the UK, and that's going to be our focus for the rest of this year. So the only way we're going to achieve that is by collaborating. One consultancy is never going to be able to change the future of UK manufacturing, but actually there's some really good things happening in the UK. There's some good people out there. There's some good centres of excellence in the high value manufacturing catapults.
Yeah,
like we can all work out how we can work together to achieve the same goal, and that's where I'm currently talking to a few people just to see how can we collaborate, how can we work together, because we've got the ideal opportunity to bring manufacturing back to the UK. And yes, we're really excited about how we can play a part in that. I'm not so excited about the winter coming up, the first UK winter in 12 years. So that's quarter-4s. I've got that to look forward to at least next year.
Well, it sounds like there's an awful lot of opportunity out there for your business and others providing services into organisations that just have to get smarter and get more efficient and more productive. So, well, that's pretty much brought us to the end of our episode today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, Alastair. I wish you all the very best on your, continued expansion in the UK and the rollout of further services. What's the best way for businesses to get in touch with you if they've got any questions about your services at LMAC?
You can find all of our details are on our website, which is lmac-group.com. So if you go to there, you'll find our contact details and inquiry forms.
So that wraps up today's episode. Hope you've enjoyed our discussion. Thanks again to Alastair Crawford. Thank you for listening, and look out for the next episode of Insights for Manufacturing. See you next time, and bye-bye.